The Expropriation Act that was recently passed as a law in South Africa has sparked a massive amount of debate, with people fearing that they're going to lose their properties overnight, and that foreign investment into the country is now going to be diminished because the land rights in the country are no longer stable or no longer exist. So is this true? Is this a fact of life now? Are we going to lose our properties arbitrarily without having any choice, any decision in the matter, not being paid a cent of compensation? And although this is going to be quite a short video, the idea behind this video is to bust some myths. We want to be able to have the conversation around the Expropriation Act within the context under which it was intended, or we understand it being intended. So the first thing that we need to bear in mind is expropriation has been a part of South Africa for many, many years. Before this act, there was a current act that was in place, and that act allowed for expropriation under certain circumstances. So this is not a new thing. All states in the world have provision for expropriation. So to give you a very basic example, if you look at the Gautrain, for instance, some of the land that was taken for the construction and implementation of the Gautrain project was done through expropriation. The difference between the previous act, however, and the current act is around, number one, the court processes were introduced. Number two, the fact that now it speaks about there being a public interest as opposed to just a public purpose. So public interest is defined as land reform. And then the third one is that there are provisions that are being made now insofar as compensation is concerned. The one being that the previous act spoke about market value, whereas this act speaks about just and equitable. And I'll explain that in a second. And there are provisions in this new act that deal with zero compensation, which we'll also discuss shortly. Now, to deal with the first one, insofar as what's a just amount to pay for land. So first of all, this indicates that land is not simply going to be taken away without any consideration whatsoever about a person receiving consideration, right? Basically receiving a purchase price or a value of their property. Now, the courts do have a very big part to play in determining this value. And we've seen the courts over the last couple of years, especially since 1994, the courts do take a very tough stance on government from time to time. So simply by giving the court this power and given the division of powers where our judiciary has been critical of certain government decisions, this act has not given government carte blanche to do whatever they want insofar as your property is concerned, because the courts are still involved and the courts must use this test to determine what appropriate consideration is. So the second conversation is around, but if the act says that I'm going to be paid zero for my property, then it doesn't matter what the court says. Yes, but the circumstances under which zero compensation applies are limited. These are limited to, for example, abandoned buildings where the owner of the property, if you think about CBD buildings as an example, that aren't being maintained, where there's explosions and deterioration and destruction and deaths. In cases like that, yes, there could be an argument to be made that there will be expropriation without compensation. A state-owned land that's not being utilized at all. Again, that's a perfect example. Land where the government has actually assisted and given grants for the acquisition and improvement of the land, where owner now can't expect government to now pay a market value for land that government in itself invested and increased the value of. So there's a couple of examples like this that are very particular and that apply to zero compensation. But if we look at this overall, as a policy, as a change in circumstances in South Africa, I cannot comment and I cannot promise that very few things will change. What I can say is based on what government has said and what the critics have said. It does appear that the idea behind this is to implement the policy of land reform, yes, but not to take away property from active owners who actively manage these properties, whether it's lets, whether it's commercial property, even farming to a certain degree, mining. It's not about taking property away of a functioning business that's employing people and generating revenue for that. That is not the intention. This isn't about handing over businesses. This is about land redistribution, which is very particularly defined in the Act as public interest. And the circumstances under which this can take place are also well defined. Is this going to be tested? Yes. Are there political parties that are looking to challenge this constitutional court? Absolutely. And that is how our system is going to tweak how this legislation is going to be implemented. Is there a reason to worry about Donald Trump's comments on this topic? Honestly, I think it's two different issues altogether. We are, as has been done in the past, there's international conversations or foreign conversations about certain treatment of race groups in South Africa. Do I think that this is entirely relevant now to this land reform and this Expropriation Act? I honestly don't think that it's going to be relevant, because this act would have existed whether a person likes it or not. And does it have a racial motivation? I cannot see how. But again, it is early days. We do have to give it some time. But from the looks of it and the way that the act is drafted and provides for correct mechanisms, this is not supposed to be a chaotic expropriation or chaotic redistribution of land. Very well defined recourse put into place that allows landowners to debate and notices to be given before anything takes place.